Hi, Living It Out Team 5. Thank you so much for stepping up to serve this week. I appreciate it so much. These sort of mysterious week fives and how we put this team together. So thank you very much. We have the privilege of kicking off the One-on-One with Jesus series, and this really the overarching idea for this series is about how we're changed when we follow Jesus, not just when we know him. So the wording is life changes when Jesus goes from someone we know to the one that we follow. This will be part of what follows us throughout this series, but again, we get the privilege of kicking it off. And we are going to be sitting in Luke chapter 5, verse 1 through 11. This particular set of verses really focuses on Peter's call to discipleship, but the one-on-one piece and how there had been some previous interaction with Jesus. Peter had had previous interaction with Jesus, but this is really the pivotal moment for Peter in really understanding who Jesus is, who he is in relationship to him, and then how it changes everything. So you'll see at the very top of the notes, I'm going to reference them a few times here. There are 3 practices that Ben will talk about. Within every setback is an invitation to step up. And you'll notice that I noted the verses there so that you could see where those practices were coming out of from the verses. The second one is our top priority paves the path to our future. And then Jesus can see beyond who we are to who we can become. And so you'll see here that on Monday, I'm going to go ahead and do Monday. And I mentioned this quickly, or I think I mentioned it in the email that I sent, that you actually will have a day assigned to you this week. I really felt led that way, and just because of the way that the content was. So, don't read anything else into that other than I just felt strongly about it this week. So I'm going to take Monday, as I've usually been doing, and then you'll see on Tuesday, Martha's going to go ahead and take Tuesday, and this is really about Peter now seeing the shift from who Jesus, who he thought Jesus was, or sort of knew him to be, which was a teacher, to master and Lord, or I should say teacher and master kind of go together, to Lord of his life and actually following him. I have some resources there for you to check out. But again, this is sort of Peter's recognition of who Jesus is, but then who he is because of it. And the reality is that when you get down to, I love the verses here where it shows the switch. Verse 5 starts out master, and then by the end of those verses, I think it is verse 7 and 8, where he falls down and calls him Lord and recognizes that piece. So Jesus is inviting him to take the next step. And I just want you to be mindful again of how the practices can set up your day. There may not be, while there's a verse to verse in the sermon, while it may not look like that in the Living It Out, be sure and just go back to those sermon notes. And if there is a practice that lines up for you and the way that that content drives, it's okay to include it here. If we talk about them multiple times, that's okay. Repeat is okay. Not over and over and over the same thing, but sometimes if we come at it from different places and as these verses lead us. Remember, it should be the verses and the big point that really lead you. So looking at the title of the day, looking at the big point and the verses, all of that should match up for you so that the introduction sits at that 250 to 300 words, and just ask great questions through read, believe, and live. Don't layer those questions. Just ask one great question in the believe. Maybe it's 2 great questions in live, but it's better for us to do more with less. One great question in those sections. Wednesday, you'll see, is about priorities. Excuse me. There is a resource there, Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. And so go ahead, Pam's going to take Wednesday, and that is really the practice of priorities. So you'll want to tap into that. And Then on Thursday, we have a new member of our team. Andy Rechtenwald has joined the Living It Out team, and you'll be hearing a lot more about Andy in the next couple weeks. And so he's going to go ahead and write on Thursday, and so that's why it's so blank, is Andy and I have had a chance to talk about that today. And then Kelda will do Friday. This is really pulling all of those practices together and how Jesus is asking each of us to live for more. I think for me and Kelda on this Friday, if you can compare and contrast Peter and sort of how Jesus asks him questions, and now later we're seeing here in John, Philip being asked some of the same sort of questions. Just take a look at how those two texts line up. There might be a little something there that you can just compare and contrast, just a sentence or two to pull those together. I want to let you all know too that we are starting a gospel reading plan, and it will be the book of John. So that's why the first part of the Living It Out is sitting in Luke, and so be careful about those contexts. Remember on Tuesday and Wednesday, since you're both sitting in Luke, that you don't have to set up a lot of context in those, because Monday will do the work, but just give it a nod. And then Thursday and Friday, we're going to come out of the chapters that are part of the gospel reading plan. So for this first part of March leading up to Easter, we'll be reading the book of John together as a church. And so that's how the Living It Out is going to support that piece. All right. I think that is it for me. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, this one-on-one is all about how all of us are changed when we go one-on-one with Jesus. And some of these practices about our priorities, when we really begin to follow him, who we are in him, that all is going to come through throughout this series. So I'm available to you if you need anything. Remember our deadline of tomorrow morning, and our best for his glory. I can't wait to see what he does.